Hi class, welcome back to another episode of lesson 2 for Rhino. So we're gonna probably touch on today's on what's origin 0 point of Rhino, axis based on XYZ, views orientation, some good zoom functions like the selected and extend, moved, copy and Osnaps of some of these primitives that we've seen on the screen here. Alright, so I will turn on the layers. So it looks like a pie or a cake icon, so you could probably will not miss this. I will turn off the whatever that is not necessary. Okay, so where exactly is the 0 point of Rhino? Right, so now you can see I have indicated on the screen that this point here indicates the XYZ 0 point of the whole entire software. Alright, so that's the 0 point of XYZ. So how about the grid? I know many folks sometimes wonder where to orientate the grids, whether to turn it on, turn it off, and what is the true function of using the grid or not. Well, for a start, I would recommend you to use the grid as your floor orientation, because if you're not used to 3D, and then you will find that you are floating in the space. So where is the grid adjustment? Basically, it is right at the option icon right here. And look for grid. So basically on the screen it says 100. Alright, the minor one is 1 and followed by the major of 10 mm each. So 100, 110. Alright, just remember this spacing now. So where is 100? So basically 100 starts from this 0 point and all the way 100 mm across this distance by this distance, x, y, and there's no z. Okay, so x and y based on this grid, and the 1, which is the minor one, and the 10 is basically this major lines here. Okay, so that's the grid orientation. If you do not like to use the grid after a while, you can use the F7 to turn it off, keyboard, and turn it on F7 again. So basically that's the grid function, just to introduce to you. If you do want to change the grid, let's say you want to have it a lot larger than 200. So now the grid has increases in its size. Alright, so I will change this back again, 100. Alright. So we talk about the origin. Next, we want to talk about the axis, the XYZ axis. So axis shown on the screen here, X runs this way, Y runs this way, Z runs this way. So where is the icon for these indication? If your screen doesn't have XYZ like this, it is on your left bottom here where the Rhino indicates where the XYZ is. Okay, so if you rotate, if you pick on your right mouse and you rotate, you will see the orientation on these icons here indicates your rotation factor. So many users have rotate their models and they lost in that space here. So if you realize that it goes -Z, how would you know? If you look at the left icon again, the Z, if it's pointing downwards, so you have your object upside down. Okay, so rotate this back again and you should be fine. Right, so that's where the X and Y, Z is. So next I want to highlight to you would be the views. I'm gonna off the axis and turn on the views. Maybe the axis will help me for a while. Okay, so let's get to see this a lot clearer. So the front view and top view. Why would I want to indicate this? Just to share with you, if you use your title viewport tabs, which is at the bottom left here, it indicates this perspective view that we are working on, followed by the top view. If you just click on this, and that's a top view, and the front view, it's here. Okay, front view and right view. So I will turn this to shaded with the drop down arrow on the title viewports here, and then shaded back to perspective. If I want shaded, I turn this on, shaded again. Okay, so front, top. I guess you know where the right is and the left view is. I'm not going to explain further. So this is the basic orientation of the viewports. I hope you just play around with it, where the left views are. If you would like to have more views than this, this is where you could expand your viewports to the back, right, onto the bottom. Okay, so you have 2-point perspective. Okay, we'll talk about this when we build some architecture models later on. Alright, so these are the basic viewports that I would just like to highlight to you. Next in line, we want to talk about the zoom. Okay, so zoom selected, zoom extend, it's basically one of the pretty common zoom factor that you will probably be using. So zoom extend, you could find them right here on the left mouse peak. So Rhino has usually 2 commands for each icon most of the time, right? So if you put your mouse over the icon, sometimes it will indicate a left mouse or a right mouse. So each function represents a command. So I'm going to pick on left mouse. Right here it says zoom extends. Okay, and let's say if I hide these tags here, okay, I'll just hide these tags here, and I pick on zoom extend again, I will just move this, I'll dock this right here. So I'll click on zoom extend again, and it will put the models in the center of the viewports. So what's zoom selected that I mentioned? Zoom selected is something that you could pick on. Let's say this is something that I want to look at, and I select it, and I click on zoom selected, left mouse, and this item is right on the screen. Alright, so it's now in the middle of the screen, so I could rotate this however I want. And then if I want to see the whole entire models again, I click on zoom extend. Alright, so that gives you an idea what zoom extend is and zoom selector. It's a pretty useful tools as well. Alright, next I will hide the views. I will turn on the objects. Alright, this is what I see, and I would just say zoom extend again. So it is right now in the center of my screen. I will just have my property panels slightly smaller, so it gives me more space to work as well. Alright, so I would like to highlight to you that if you happen to pan, I've seen a lot of users pan this. Let's say if they work on some models, they zoom in, zoom out. Alright, and then they probably pan the items, and they rotate. So they kind of lost in their orientation, okay, and they're finding themselves very uncomfortable. They could also pause, pan, right, pan the models in the center of the screen and try to rotate them. Right, so you have a good screen, work on that, and try not to push them to a corner and work like this. Well, it's a pity. You have a big screen that you do not utilize. So now zoom extend again. I want to bring to your attention now the Osnap function, the Osnap. So if you have turned on Rhino and if you notice that the Osnap is right at the bottom, okay, well, next step we want to talk about would be having to move the items. Okay, move the items in a very basic Osnap functions. Okay, so I'll just zoom in right here. Alright, so it's 4 basic primitives. You could also give this a try on your exercises. So where is the move command? So move command, it's right here, transform move. Alright, transform move. So you could see that Rhino first question asking you select objects to move. I say the cylinder to move, enter, and point to move from. So if I would like to move this, visually, okay, if you just pick and drag this over this, you would probably think that it's moving. No, it's just dragging the objects from point to point. Alright, so I will demonstrate this again. Transform move, select the item, enter. You notice that the command asks you the next question, point to move from. So it will be good if you could snap on some corners that is very accurately and then move it right on top of this cube here. So what would I need to use? I will just move my mouse and drag the Osnap out. Okay, so I will pick on quadrant, 4 points of a circle. Alright, so I'll just pick on this quadrant here. You could see that it indicates a quadrant on the screen. Alright, it shows that you have selected the quadrant. So that's good. And let's move to this point here. So the cube, I'm gonna pan this slightly. The cube, however, doesn't have a quadrant. So I would probably need, you will think it's an endpoint. I'll explain these lines that you see on the screen shortly. You would think that I would need an endpoint. No, since let's give this a try. It doesn't say it's endpoint. So I will pick on midpoint. Here it goes. You can see that again. I'm not going to remove my commands, but I'm going to leave the mouse attached to the cylinder. So you can just let go your mouse and give this a try. Then make sure that your mouse is always holding on to your cylinder and snap. Once you see the midpoint popping out on the screen, you're good. Right, so I'll zoom back slightly. Transform move again. Alright, select the cone shape that we have here, enter. Select objects. Once we're done, we press enter. Next that we want to move is same quadrant. Let's try quadrant, and we could also say quadrant here. Alright, that's done. So the last one, that is the sphere. We would want to move the sphere on top of the tip point of the cone shape. Alright, so I'm gonna zoom in. So where could we pick on for the sphere? Well, the sphere has no quadrant. Okay, transform move, select the item, press my space bar. Well, you could, but we're not picking here. Alright, so because we want to pick at the bottom here, it says endpoint. Alright, it doesn't really quite indicate quadrant because it's not a, I'll show to you shortly what it does. So I'll pick on an endpoint. Seems like it's an endpoint, and it's an endpoint here. So we're done very accurately. The model sits nicely on each other. So we want to make a copy, transform copy. select the item. Okay, I'm going from right to left. Select the item, enter. Alright, so at this junction, Rhino likes to ask a point to copy from. Okay, so I could also indicate this endpoint. That's my picking point. And I can type 0. If I type a numerical 0, it goes right straight to the 0 point of my axis. Okay, so we're gonna end the lesson in a short while, but before we do so, I want to show you what I meant by these lines that we talk about. So these are ISO curves. If you allow me, I'm just gonna delete this. These are ISO curves. These are representation of the surface on Rhino. Alright, so they are there visually, but they are not physically there. Okay, visually I can see, but they are somehow that I can't snap. There's no intersection. I cannot do an intersection line. Okay, they are not real in that sense. So what I meant is this. I'm going to select the property of the sphere and I'll show it to you. Properties and object properties. If you could notice on the surface ISO curve, I could switch it off. Alright, and this is on the shaded mode. I say wireframe. So therefore, the earlier example I was trying to indicate was this is an endpoint. I couldn't really get a quadrant on this area here. Maybe a quadrant here, but that's an endpoint. Alright, so this is wireframe. Shaded will indicate this. This is show ISO curve. I say no. And what does this cone shape look like in reality? This is the wireframe of this. So if Rhino doesn't turn the ISO curve on, visually we probably would not understand the effect of the model. What does it really look like? So for just takeaway would be these ISO curves are indication, representation of the surface. Okay, and can I increase ISO curves? Yes, I can. So I increase my ISO curves. They are helpful. We'll share with you later how we could probably take advantage of ISO curves. Okay, you could increase the ISO curves. It doesn't really increase the file size because these again, I mentioned that these are representation of how the structure looks like in the surface. Okay, so if I take this away, remove ISO curves, the box doesn't have any representation. Okay, so we basically just run through this 0, XYZ, orientation, zoom, and copy and Osnap. Alright, I hope you can practice this. Otherwise, try to move and copy this again. Alright, thank you for the lesson.